The award-winning A Black Executive Perspective podcast presents A Mixed Executive Perspective. Hosted by Grace Fooden Correy, a biracial executive with a distinct voice on leadership and belonging. A Mixed Executive Perspective.
Hi, I'm Grace Fooden Correy, and welcome to A Mixed Executive Perspective. This is a space to explore how mixed identity is read and often misunderstood in corporate culture and beyond. These conversations are for mixed people across race, ethnicity, nationality, and culture, and for parents raising mixed children navigating these dynamics. So today, I'm going to walk you through a recent shift in my identity and what it reveals about how mixed identity is read in American culture. I'll talk about how perception shows up before intention and the quiet adjustments many mixed people make to be understood and the emotional cost of navigating environments that weren't designed with our complexity in mind. If you've ever felt like you had to explain yourself, edit yourself, or decide how much of yourself is safe to bring into the room, this conversation is for you. So let's break it down. So I'm going to talk today about a book that I just read by a woman, Dorothy Roberts. It's called Love, Race, and the Mixed Marriage Project. And this is a history of mixed marriages in Chicago, where I'm from and where Dorothy is from as well. And it was really a personal excavation for me to read this book because it's over the last 100 years, and it talks about the context on which my parents got together. And you know your parents, but you don't really know them as a young couple and how they got together. And this really showed that to me, what the world was like. The Great Migration had happened and brought all these Black people to Chicago. Chicago expanded in tremendously, but there were a lot of covenants and people could live in different places. And mixed people had even less places to live. And so that brings me to the understanding of why my parents created this housing co-op where mixed people could comfortably live. And it was part of a neighborhood where mixed people could comfortably live. And so I learned so much about them in this that I would never have known across time. But when I heard about this book, it was through one of my very oldest friend, a white woman who I've been going to school with since nursery school. And she had heard about it on Fresh Air on NPR. And she had heard Dorothy speak a bit, and she just assumed that my parents would be a part of this, just knowing how they were activists and they were a mixed race couple. So she reached out and said, "Hey, are your parents in this book?" And I'm like, "What book?" I didn't even know there was a book. So I went out and I got the book and I started reading it feverishly. And I found out that that there was a lot in common between my life and hers. And I went out to her publicist and I said, "Hey, I think I might be in this book, or my parents might be in this book." And I gave my story, and the publicist didn't respond. She responded. She responded with really intimate details, realizing there's a very good chance there's some connection to your parents in this book. So I went along and told her more. And the next email I got the next day was, "I think your parents are in this book. And there are only pseudonyms in this book. And so your parents are probably the Greens." So now I stop reading and I start feverishly looking ahead for the story of the Greens. And there are the Greens. And in one moment, I know it's my mother that's speaking. So they apparently had been interviewed twice by them, but only one story made this particular book. And so this story was my mother talking about how she knew marrying this white man had nothing to do with race. It was only to do about their love, and about how they came together and knew and really talked about things intimately before they got together in this very difficult time for a mixed couple to get together. And I felt I knew her more in that. It really changed my connection to my mom and my dad and how they got together. You know, a lot of people in that time, there was some race mixing because it was cool, because a Black person wanted to have a different proximity to a white person. But this was not the case with my parents. They loved each other. A white Jewish boy and a very dark-skinned Black woman got together for love. And they were also part of the Committee on Racial Equality because, that was a place where they could, be together and in a safe space and have some political action on the world and the community. One of the biggest ahas for me in that little section about Mrs. Green talking about being married to my father was that she said that my grandparents on both sides did not accept the marriage. Now, that would be considered normal in most cases, but I grew up with my mother's mother next door to us. So I always assumed she accepted. She went to City Hall with them when they got officially married. And I never met my father's side of the family for, decades later. So I always thought that's how it was. But this told me my grandmother, her mother, also had issues with it. And also, it says in the book that things softened after they had children. So it is true that my grandmother became closer, moved next door to us after the children were born. So that made perfect sense to me. And then it also made a little more sense as to why my grandmother on my father's side came totally out of context to visit us at 12 years old, went to my sister's high school graduation, had lunch, and then immediately went home. I never understood where this woman came from. I mean, she was just a little old white Jewish lady to me. I didn't really understand her as a relative for a really long time. But that was her softening. And obviously she softened before her husband did, because her husband didn't reconnect with us for another 10 or 20 years. So that was what I really took away from this book, was that a different connection with my parents over time. And this idea that my grandparents' relationship to me wasn't always the way I perceived it. And that was really a shift. Another thing I got was that Dorothy's story was really a mirror to mine, and it had different adaptations. So she also had a very white man married to a very dark woman. In fact, her mother was African. And the main difference is that, we lived a few blocks apart, but we went to different schools. She went to the public school, which, didn't hurt her a bit. She still has a Genius Award and went to Harvard. And I went to the private school, primarily white, and had a completely different culture because of that. In her school, we lived in a neighborhood where Jesse Jackson lived, where Muhammad Ali lived. They came to her school, and they, gave them a sense of pride about being Black and doing things in the world. In my school, there was none of that. And in fact, one of the years in my elementary school, when Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali were fighting, there was a poll taken in my class about who the students were for. And of course, they only could reflect their parents because we were just, 7, 8, so young, we didn't really know anything. But every one of them, except 2 of us, went for Joe Frazier because Muhammad Ali was politically a hot button. And my mother loved Muhammad Ali and what he stood for. And so I raised my hand for him. So that's the difference. She's seeing Jesse Jackson and Muhammad Ali as heroes, and I'm feeling isolated by having that as part of my life, and kind of felt funny about raising my hand and saying that's who I was for. And that's really a major cost of growing up in different cultures that I learned during that time and that I really reflected on now. She also is a little older than I am, and so she read Stokely Carmichael when she was in her formative years, and she started learning about Black power. Well, that changed her perception of herself. And then she started thinking of herself as a Black woman with a white father. Now, I was too young for that. And by the time I would become of age, Black power was softening culturally. It wasn't like, this isn't the hot thing. And so I still thought of myself as a mixed woman. And that is very different than the way the culture around me saw me. So as I think about it after reading this, I actually changed my perception. She's right. I am a Black woman. I am a Black woman living in this culture with mixed parents, with a white father. That's a completely seismic shift for how I see myself in the world from here forward. And I even remember my hairdresser saying that to me once. Oh, but you're Black. And it's, again, reflecting, this is how the culture sees me, as opposed to how my parents made me feel at home. So this is something that I think is really important to think about. Identity is formed both inside and outside the home. And if you're a mixed couple raising children of any combination, understand that your child's identity is not only what you teach them at home, it's what they're seeing outside. And you may not know that, and they may not even know that for a really long time, like I didn't. And I don't feel bad about having thought about it another way for all this time. I just feel like I'm still learning. We're all still learning. And this is something new that I'm taking in. But we're all shaped by the majority culture. And the sooner we understand that and accept that, the easier it is to manage within it. And instead of feeling like it's someone's fault, it's almost like that is the default of how we are as human beings. And this is even true if you go, my love will transcend this. My love for my children is so great that they will, see themselves as I see them. Well, yes, they will. And what's going on outside in the world is also going to affect them and be how they see themselves. So ignoring this doesn't protect your children. Preparing them for this does. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. So before we wrap, don't forget to check out A Black Executive Perspective, hosted by TonyTidbit and Chris P. Reed. Each week, they tackle leadership, culture, and the conversations many people avoid. You can find it right here on A Black Executive Perspective channel. And thank you for joining A Mixed Executive Perspective, a space where we examine how mixed identity is read at work, culture, and in the stories we're told about ourselves. If this conversation resonated with you, please share your thoughts, comments, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And in addition, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs this conversation. It helps us reach more people. Until next time, remember, you belong.
A Black Executive Perspective.